Today we have Believe in Better, the Ted Lasso inspired guide to communicating and driving change. Our speaker today is Todd Greider. He is a certified executive coach with 20 plus years in sales enablement, talent development, and coaching. He helps leaders, whether new or seasoned VPs, unlock their full potential. A writer, facilitator, and speaker, he has been published in industry publications and presented to audiences from 12 to 2,000. TED specializes in helping leaders communicate effectively, inspire accountability, and lead with energy. His mission is to empower others to thrive, inspire, and evolve. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Todd. Todd, when you're ready, begin sharing your presentation. Great, we can see it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate everyone joining for today's session. Excited to talk through ultimately how we navigate change and how we help others navigate change when it can sometimes feel heavy in our organizations, because ultimately change is inevitable. And as we think about how we navigate change, the way that we perceive change also impacts how we handle it, both emotionally and then the actions that we take. In fact, change is so prevalent, and change can also be challenging for many, that some studies by Willis Towers Watson, PwC, and Gartner shared that over 70% of change initiatives inside organizations of all sizes fail to meet their key targets and their outcomes. Now, that doesn't mean that change isn't happening. It means that the designated tasks or designated targets and outcomes are not meeting the initial expectations. So how do we change that? And one of the things that helps us shift our mindset and helps us embrace change more effectively is through optimism and positivity. And I love the show Ted Lasso. For those of you that are Ted Lasso fans, if you're a fan of Ted Lasso, or if you've never seen the show but you're a fan of positivity and optimism in the face of adversity, go ahead and put yes if you're a fan of positivity, or if you're a fan of the show Ted Lasso. Barbecue sauce, yes. So I see some raving fans. Now, I love Ted Lasso, not just because I'm a soccer fanatic. I love soccer, but I love the simplistic nature and the positivity that this show brings. And as we look at many of the shows that are out there, this one caught my attention for a variety of reasons. And there's a lot that can be learned and applied to how we drive change. And we'll share some examples of Ted Lasso, of how he leveraged change to leverage positivity and optimism to move people forward within the Richmond AFC organization. Because again, there's a lot that we can learn from that experience and helping people know and embrace change. Now, during our time together, we're going to focus on a couple things. So here's what we're going to focus on. We're going to talk about why intent isn't enough. So why is positive intent not enough? And we'll explore that. We'll also talk about why change feels harder. And I don't know about you, but sometimes change feels harder than it has to be. Simple things feel like something so dramatic when we're trying to shift the mindset or shift the behavior within ourselves or within an organization. I'll share three strategies that were inspired by things that Ted Lasso did in that show to move the organization forward. Because bear in mind, he knew nothing about soccer, but he knew how to connect with people and inspire them to grow and change. And Karen put some materials in there that allow some frameworks that you can use, again, inspired by some of the lessons learned in this Ted Lasso show that we can all carry forward. And so as we think about why change can feel hard, what are some of the top reasons that we talked about earlier of why change fails within organizations? Go ahead and put in the chat. What are some of the top reasons that change fails to meet the mark of the objectives? So fear, too much all at once. Yeah, drinking from a fire hose, lack of communication, habits. Yeah, old habits die hard. It's hard to change. I saw mistrust there as well. Certainly some lack of transparency, which I think goes back to it. Too painful. Change fatigue. Absolutely. So the three reasons that we're going to hone in on as far as the frameworks and other things are vision and leadership alignment. Has everyone bought into what we're trying to accomplish and the change that we're trying to evoke? Poor communication, many of you nailed it, whether it's lack of transparency or lack of frequency in which we communicate. And then resistance. There is always be resistance, but how do we mitigate that risk, and how do we overcome that, and what's going to inspire somebody to do something different with how they navigate it? So let's talk a little bit of truth in about change. Well, we earlier in the objectives we talked about why positive intent is not enough. um, most That's where most change begins and ends. We focus on everyone wants to change. I don't think there's anyone that doesn't want to change, especially if they see the value in doing something different. So we all want to change, and positive intent is important to have when you're thinking about how we change and why we change. But it's intent is not enough. If intent were enough, everyone would be millionaires. Everyone would have their dream job. They would have the work in the organization that has the best culture and the best environment for them. They would reach those pesky fitness goals that we all set for ourselves. So positive intent is a great thing, and it's an essential piece, but positive intent alone is not enough. Um, and to see the comment here, most people want change, but they don't want to change. And that's a great point. We're going to talk more about that. In our hearts, most people want to change. But as we'll allude to later, it's enduring the pain of change that holds many individuals back. So how do we help them navigate that? And I love the quote from Ted Lasso, which is, taking on a challenge is like riding a horse. If you're doing it right, it's not going to be comfortable. So when we think about navigating change, most change efforts try and focus on helping people be comfortable with change. But as many of us are in HR and talent development, change is the only going through something that's hard and uncomfortable is how we grow. We don't grow when we're comfortable. That puts us in our status quo, our safe zone, our comfort zone. We don't change in our comfort zone. And so how do we help people become more comfortable being uncomfortable? And so and acting in the face of that. So when we think about the next piece, so we have positive intent. Now we need to focus on effort. And for me personally, I look at effort as the mindset shift. We're not taking action yet because our mindset determines what we do next. And so as we think about the importance of effort, what is the biggest contributor to making change happen? Why is effort, that mindset shift, the biggest contributor to making change happen? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Why is effort so important? Even more so than perhaps the actions we take. Connection, willingness to change, persistence, holding yourself accountable. Yeah, because the effort determines the level of motion and activity and mindset and discipline that we put into the action. Because if the mind doesn't fully believe in the change, the actions, while we may take actions, we are not giving it our undivided attention, or we're not pouring our full self into those actions. So effort is extremely important. I love that quote. The effort is the engine behind the transformation. Yes, absolutely. Because we can go through the motions, but if we don't believe in them, the motions don't have the same impact that perhaps we would want, in which case it goes back to that quote we had at the beginning, or the stat that we had at the beginning, which is 70% fall short. Most likely because the effort was not fully there. The actions were taking place, but the effort was not behind the actions. And so that leads us to the third part about truth of change, is that you have to have positive intent, you have to have the right mindset and the level of effort and the discipline put in there, but then the action. And action is where that consistency comes into play. And so when you're communicating and promoting change, what are the challenges that you can encounter when it comes to the action phase? You get people to buy in, they have the intent, they have the right mindset, but something goes off the rails with action. What are some of the challenges that you're facing personally in the action part of it? reverting back to old habits, getting started, lack of time, constraints, too much bureaucracy. And then, of course, there's always conflicting objectives. There's different change initiatives going on all at once. I see fear of the unknown, no plan. Absolutely. So then in action, there has to be a level of discipline. And then you see the word here, consistent behavioral shift. It's easy to get people to do something once. It's more challenging to get them to do it more than one time and to come back time and time again. And that's a critically important piece. Action is a critical component because, again, once or twice isn't enough. And a lot of my experience over the last 20 years has been in sales enablement. And one of the things that we found, and statistics out there, again, by Gartner and other research firms, have found that 80% of salespeople follow up with a client one time. When in reality, to drive a behavior change with a particular client or buyer, it takes a minimum of 5 times, 5 outreaches, 5 follow-ups in order to get them to move perhaps in a direction that's favorable, not only to the client, but also to the seller. And that same concept translates into every facet of what we do. Oftentimes we need to tell people more than one time or show them more than one time what is needed in order to drive a change, to support that effort, to support that action. So consistency and discipline becomes a critical piece. That is a huge component of it. And oftentimes we find in organizations where communication will be sent, and it's great for awareness, but to drive a behavioral change requires much more action planning, discipline, and consistency over weeks and months, and perhaps even a year, especially if you're in that change fatigue where there's so many initiatives going on at one particular time. How do you drive change in each of them equally to get the outcomes that you're looking for within your organization? And then ultimately, when all 3 of those things come into play, positive intent, right mindset and level of effort, the amount of discipline and having consistent actions and a plan in place, change starts to take place, and we see the results that we're looking for. Now, the thing I love about Ted Lasso is he didn't just tell the team what he wanted to accomplish. Again, he came into the organization and he knew nothing about soccer. But one thing that Ted was really good at was getting to know people. And he focused on influencing the heart. And when we can get people behind the need for change, and we focus on the person and not necessarily the outcome, then you can encourage and help people get comfortable being uncomfortable. And there's a great moment in the TED and that articulates this well. The character Jamie Tart, he was a young, extremely successful athlete. He was a great goal scorer, but he had something else. He was the epitome of that selfish star because he had all the ego, all the talent. He was obsessed with fame, and he was allergic to teamwork. Jamie Tart didn't see the value of being a team player, and he kind of had this anger and control, and he wanted to do things his way. Now, Jamie, Ted could have came at Jamie and got frustrated with Jamie, but he didn't. Instead of trying to force Jamie to change and become the leader of the team that Ted wanted him to be, Ted created a culture where he made it so irresistible that Jamie felt the need to become a different person long before he even knew he needed to be a different person. And the way that Ted did it is Ted believed in Jamie when Jamie didn't believe in himself. Because see, under that tough exterior and that ego and the clamoring for fame, Jamie was looking for something more. He just didn't know what he was looking for. And through all those quiet conversations, those constant touch points and showing aggression and anger with kindness, Ted was able to slowly shift Jamie's perspective over a period of time. And while Jamie had to have a little bit of a breakdown later in the show and experience some hardship, some failure, some personal loss, Ted was still there for him no matter what. There was no judgment. And I saw the comments earlier, be curious, not judgmental. One of my favorite comments from the show. But Ted was always there without judgment. He didn't care how Jamie behaved in the past or what was done in the past. He focused on the present forward because he believed in who Jamie could be. And he did it with open arms, and he did it with quiet accountability. And so that through that consistent discipline and many different aspects, conversations, short meetings, making time for Jamie, all of those things are what ultimately moved Jamie from this is all about me to how do we help the team and how do we become part of the we. And so he ended up continuing to be that goal scorer, but he also started to become a team player and passing to his teammates, and he elevated everyone else as a result of the conversations and interactions that Ted had with him. And so this translates into the corporate world in the sense that activating leaders and activating your top talent in a way that is unique to them and allows them to transform in a way perhaps they may not even know. People often undervalue their strengths. So helping people see their strengths, activate their strengths, and leverage them not only for their own personal growth and gain, but for everyone else around them as well is extremely important. And so how that it worked out is you saw the intent. So Ted had positive intent, and he knew that Jamie did as well. He shifted the mindset, and Ted was all in all the time. He was committed to the effort, and he had the discipline to have the actions in place. And ultimately, the transformation came out over a course of several seasons as we saw Jamie become the person that he ultimately became. And that's what we want to activate within the organizations as well. And again, intent versus impact. Intent will quickly fade, often exists only in the leadership's mindset, and oftentimes the intent can be hidden. That could be part of that lack of transparency that some of you shared before. Now, the impact that requires those systems that we talked about. So, how do we put things in play that allow us to have those systems in place in order to do all of the things that we need to do and inspire people at their core, connect with their hearts in a way that's going to be meaningful to them? And as we take lessons from Ted Lasso, he focused on how he communicates change. Well, leading with the heart, connecting with the emotions. When communicating change within organizations, it's typically focused on why the organization needs to change. And that may be coming from external factors. It may be coming from shifts in leadership and perspectives on how to lead the organization forward. But ultimately, that's not what inspires people to change. You may believe in the organization, the mission, but believing in who you will become and who each person will become as a result of that change. Does it drive career growth? Does it drive greater sense of belonging and connection to the mission of the organization? Or what many of the other factors that get people inspired to become part of something more or something bigger than themselves is critically important. The key is also to embrace simplicity. Ted kept it down to a couple key things. Always, and we'll go through these in just a moment, is he focuses on optimism. He focuses on connecting to people and having small wins, not jumping leaps and bounds. He knows that change doesn't happen overnight. So he focuses on what are those small wins that I can do consistently over a long period of time to help someone else be their best self. And then ultimately the follow through, that is that critically important piece. And it goes back to the stat we shared earlier around follow up within a sales environment, that while most salespeople follow up once, what's needed is 5 times. So how do we build that discipline within our organization? And how do we do the things that we're doing in a way that's going to drive to that outcome? So here are the 3 ways that Ted focused on moving people forward. First is purposeful optimism. And as we think about communicating within an organization, be curious, not judgmental. It's easy within organizations to say, well, people don't want to change. And I think we can all agree that people do want to change, but change is hard. And change can feel harder than sometimes it has to be. So how do we get people to move in a way? And when we communicate, and you'll see some examples here on the screen. So oftentimes we focus on what the problem is that we're solving. What is this change intended to do? And an example here is, our customer satisfaction scores are terrible. that is a negative statement. And even reading that sentence brings about negative feelings. It's like you can feel the tension in your body building up. So how do we shift that focus? And if we look at that, focusing on positivity, we have a clear path to delight our customers. Small semantic shifts in how we communicate to people, especially around change, shifts our perspective. And that has a direct correlation to the level of effort that they will put into any actions that are mapped out or any plan that is in place. And as you can see here, it's the same truth told two different ways with two different energies, and it evokes a different response. When you think about change within your organization, where does your organization or your style favor? Do you focus heavily on the problem, or do you find your organization and people around you focusing on that opportunity? So if you put in problem focused or opportunity focused in the chat, which one is most common to you? Appreciative inquiry, perspective, opportunity, problem focus, and it depends. So there's a balance of opportunity and problem focus, which is great. And again, there's a time and place. Sometimes you need to call out the problem, and that is essential. How you pivot and shift that perspective and how quickly that pivot or shift takes place moves people in the direction of that possibility of what's possible. Because again, we don't want to linger in that negative space or that problem focused space, but we do need to address the problem, which is ultimately why we need to focus on that opportunity. But and I agree. I see a comment here from Cheryl. I like to think of a focus on opportunity. The truth is sometimes more on the problem, correct? And so it's a balance of how we communicate and what we lead with. And certainly leading with opportunity, but addressing and being transparent with what the problem really is can also serve that, what we were talking about earlier, is that good communication, being honest, transparent, and truthful with an opportunity mindset. And I love the part that comes to mind, and this came to the culmination of the interaction with Jamie Tart, was the dart game. Which is where that quote, "Be curious, not judgmental." And if you all remember the show, of where he was playing darts with Rupert, and Ted didn't. Rupert was pushy. He was arrogant. He was making comments at Ted because he was making assumptions about who he thought Ted was. When in reality, those were more assumptions of who Rupert was versus a reflection of who Ted was. And had he asked more questions, he may not have underestimated Ted. And when we're driving change, asking a lot of questions is critically important, and being non-judgmental. And where I see that tying into the business world is asking our audience what would be prohibiting them from making a shift towards this opportunity. Some of you mentioned earlier, it could be fear, it could be lack of confidence, it could be lack of trust in the change, or the lack of information if a change initiative is not transparent enough. So that ambiguity, that angst that surrounds that ambiguity and uncertainty can lead to that discomfort and making it feel like it. Certainly lack of self-esteem could be a part of it. Being able to tap into what would allow someone to be their best, and having those conversations, and whether it's one-on-one between managers or group discussions. You may also remember the Diamond Dogs from Ted Lasso. While it looked like a group of guys and his coaching staff, it was really an emotional support group. At its core, the Diamond Dogs were an emotional support group. It allowed them to voice their fears and concerns as they were all navigating this change of running a team with a coach who knew nothing about soccer or football, for that matter. And so that is an important piece of it. Is had a unique way of connecting to the emotions, and they were curious, not judgmental, in those sessions of the Diamond Dogs by asking more and more questions. Now, the part two, and this is critically important to how Ted Lasso communicated in the show, is he focused on communicating to the person. He looked at each person individually. And in one-on-one meetings, that's easy to do. But Ted also didn't just look at the person. He focused on the present forward. Ted didn't care what happened in the past. And he had another great conversation, be a goldfish. Let the other things go. Let the past trauma of previous change that did or did not go the right way. But be a goldfish. Let that stuff go. Focus on that opportunity that's available here. And ultimately, who do I need to be or what do I need to do in order to move myself and the organization from here to there? And he connected with people in different ways. Now, if you there's a book that what you see here on the slide is stems from, which is a book called People Styles at Work. It's by a husband and wife duo, the Boltons. And I love this, whether I'm talking about presentation skills, is there's 4 different styles of people, and it's not to put a label on people, but we often like to receive information in a particular style. So for example, I'm an analytic. I love a good spreadsheet. I love bullets. I like context. I will ask a lot of questions. But someone who's an expressive, they want to know the why. They want to understand, they may want the bullets and other things, but they want to know the big picture why. Why are we doing this in the first place? Not just does it logically make sense, but why are we doing it in the first place? The driver just wants to get it done, and it looks very similar to DISC, yes. And you have the amiable who wants that emotional connection. They want to feel like they're part of something. They want to feel connected. And so email communications may not work great for an amiable, but they might work great for an analytical or driver. An expressive and an amiable may want a conversation. They want to jump on a webinar and they want to ask questions. And so how we build a plan of action and how we connect with each person that we're trying to evoke a change in is critically important. And we can do that in a variety of ways. And we'll talk about some examples. And I encourage you to share some examples of how you're connecting with people in a way that is meaningful to them. And Ted did a phenomenal job in doing that, because you'll notice with his boss, Rebecca, he showed up day in and day out with the biscottis, and he made sure that it was exactly like she remembered it, because he wanted her to have the emotional connection to the level of emotional support, or the shortbreads. Yes, the shortbreads. He wanted to make sure that she could feel the emotional connection, that he was going to be there for her and help guide this team. Even though he didn't have all the answers, he was going to show up every single day and be there for her and the team in a way that's personalized to them. And so spreading kindness and connecting was a critical piece to that. But that discipline and showing up and connecting with her in a way that he felt she needed to be connected with. And perhaps she didn't even know that's what she needed, but she ultimately realized the value of that relationship that they built together. And so I would certainly love a shortbread every day. I love good baked goods, so that would resonate with me as well. And so again, connecting with the person. So uh, purposeful optimism, connecting with the individual. And then the third strategy that Ted employed was those small wins. And again, he did that with Rebecca, with showing up each and every day with his shortbreads. But he also didn't change who he was. Ted was the epitome of authenticity and transparency. He was the same person day in and day out with that purposeful optimism. He never got down, but it wasn't that he didn't have those negative thoughts. He didn't let those guide his actions. And so he focused on that positive effort and the positive mindset that he wanted to invoke in every relationship that he had. And he was able to inspire everyone. And Ted knew that he wasn't going to win the league after the first year, maybe not even the second year, but he knew that he could win people over one small action at a time. And so he did it with clarity. He had specific actionable steps that he did with different people. He had it with Roy Kent. He had it with Coach Beard, and the way that he interacted differently with them, but he was still, again, the same authentic Ted. How he interacted with Rebecca and Nathan and other members of his team, and even his players. He showed up in ways that were personalized to them, but always with that same energy and optimism to connect and inspire those people to move forward. And just checking up on the comments. I appreciate you all and the engagement that you're sharing here. So Yes, yeah. So some might be more skilled at adjusting your style, and it is something that can be practiced. Being a chameleon and being able to flex your style and how you communicate, whether it's having a one-on-one conversation or how you write a communication, and whether you're someone who's putting something out from corporate communications, or it could be email to an audience that you're working with. Those are all going to be key components of how you connect with people, and you can do it in almost any medium that you're using in order to connect with people. An example within my organization, there's certain people that I know, if I send them an email, I may never get a response. But if I send them an IM, they will respond quickly and acknowledge it. And they also have different ways of wanting that information. So, for example, when trying to drive change in different organizations, I have a stakeholder that will tell me, if you need me to give quick feedback, send me a Teams message. But if you need me to do research and give more thought and do some analysis, send me an email and set a note of when I should follow up. Knowing those nuances and being curious, how best can I communicate with you? How best can I work with you? Will allow you to build a relationship with someone, and it'll certainly help drive change forward, especially when you have tight deadlines and competing priorities that one of you mentioned in the chat earlier, which is all these different things come into play, and how do we navigate and drive those small wins, one action at a time, one effort at a time, and all supported by that positive intent. Based on those three strategies from Ted, which one resonates the most with you? Put number one if it's purposeful optimism. Number two, if it's the connecting to the person, so communicating with people on a level that's right for them. And number three, if you tend to lean towards favoring small wins. All right, see a nice blend of 1, 2s, and 3s. 1 and 2, I see a little bit of both. And absolutely. And these three things, again, go back to who we are as individuals, and they can lend to some of our strengths. So people that are achievers often focus on small wins. People that are great connectors, networkers, may focus on getting to know people on a personal level or connecting with them in a way, and perhaps they're more practiced, or it's just a natural skill that they have that allows them to be a chameleon and flex their style, whereas others have to put in more effort and practice and actions in order to be able to flex accordingly. Those are all going to be key components. And then, of course, anyone can focus on opportunity and optimism, and it's a great characteristic for us to have. Negativity spreads too quickly, but positivity is what leaves a lasting impression. And as we think about how we want people to perceive change, being positive and focusing on the opportunity will move people much further, much faster than focusing on the negative aspects. Now, we talked about earlier about the importance of discipline, and there's one of the two downloads is a framework that you can use when you're thinking about how you build a plan. And it's the say, show, involve. And you've probably seen some variation of this before, which is that outward communication, how you connect with your audience, how you share what the change initiative is. It could be the why frame, that messaging, whether you have a multi-channel approach. So how do you reach your audience? Is it through email? Do you hold public forums, Q&A sessions that allow people to connect? And congratulations, Louisa, for being called a chameleon. It's a respectable trait to be able to flex your style to everyone. And that helps well in that say phase, which is being able to connect with people when and how they need it. Answering the question, why this matters now. That is a critically important piece, because change may have different priority levels within an organization, and it helps eliminate some of that change fatigue, which one's more pressing than others, and being able to have those moments of clarity on which one takes precedence over another, because again, we can only consume or embrace so much change. So you communicate the change, you help people understand, you build awareness, you build understanding. But then it comes to show, and this is, I think, the greatest opportunity in many organizations is leaders modeling the behavior and focusing on leadership change first. So what that may look like. And on the handout that you have that say, show, involve, there's a few examples, but again, that showing could be uh, demonstrations of people that walk through what change looks like or how change helped them. Think of your early adopters. Those are the people that allow you to see early wins and early successes, because there's a lot of people that don't want to be the trailblazer, but they will embrace change once they know that somebody has already taken the effort to figure some of it out, so that that change becomes less painful or feels less painful because they know that it's possible. And how you advocate, how you communicate, and how you distribute those wins and showing what's working and how it's working is a good piece. The example in the worksheet of say, show, involve is a leader who was able to help a team member hit KPIs because of the way that they were able to delegate some of the tasks and the way that they were able to empower the team to do something different. So before we get to the involve piece, I'm going to pause for a moment. What are some of the things that you could do in your organization? Think of a particular change initiative that you're working on. What are some of the things that you could do in that say or show part of the framework? Or perhaps you're already doing them and you just want to celebrate that small win for you and your team. Go ahead and put them in chat.
And I'm going to break in here. There is a question that is topical here. So, do you think it is important that team members understand this as well, or understand the change curve to help them navigate their own change feelings?
I would see the value in both. I think it's important to know that there's a support system in place, because people, as we talked about, change can be hard, but if they know that there's a plan in place, in fact, one of the reasons that somebody mentioned earlier where change falls short is there's no plan. Sometimes there's a plan, but it's not communicated well. And so people, in the absence of a plan, we impose judgment and say, well, there's no plan. Being able to communicate that, hey, we're going to roll this change out and we have three elements. We're going to inform you through a series of communications. We're going to provide some early wins and examples in the show phase of people that are trailblazing, that are leading by example. And here's how your leadership team is going to involve you. Now, involvement from your leadership is important, but you have to be committed and involved yourself in the change. It's not a one-way street. And so the involve phase is how you bring leaders and associates together in that co-creation of what the future looks like from that moment forward. And that is a critical piece, is how you create that co-create, how you establish that co-creation space to bring leadership. So it's not leadership leading and associates following. It's how do we move through this together? Because the leaders are going through change too, just like their associates. They don't have all the answers. So how do we create progress together and those small wins one step at a time? And if the people that are being impacted by the change are aware of this plan, then everyone can buy into that there is a plan. It takes the judgment out, and now it creates curiosity. You're on mute, Karen.
I did that so I wouldn't interrupt you, but now I have to interrupt you. So, how do you manage the change fatigue after several wins? How do you navigate for a new series of changes?
Mhm. Well, I think that it depends on the organization and the culture is how they handle that. Some organizations are may push through and they believe that progress the only way forward, the only way path forward is forward, and you're on board or not. And then you have other organizations that will allow people to come up for air and breathe, and they'll say, okay, we'll kind of have like this slower period where we're still moving forward, but the volume of activities and the volume of things that are within the plan allow people that space to just like pause and catch up and say, okay, I'm still here, I'm still grounded, I'm still connected. Okay, let's move into that next phase. And again, that I think it really depends on the organization, it depends on the leadership culture, and it also depends on the individual, because some people are able to take on much more change than others. It could be a reflection of how they handle discomfort, but it also could be what's going on in their personal and professional lives. We don't know what people are going through, and so someone's appetite for change may be different in different stages of their life. Like somebody may embrace change wholeheartedly, but they're going through some tough times at home or other aspects of their life. And so in that moment, they need that extra breathing room. And that goes back to how do you connect with people and meet them where they are. And what they need in that particular moment, I think, is critically important. And the more we make that a discipline as opposed to a reactive type of a response, then it allows us to move forward in a much more efficient way. It's never going to be perfect, but again, the closer we are to people and understanding their needs and where they are emotionally, but also uh, productively, and where they are and their capacity to be able to do the things that are being asked of them, I think is the more we know about all of those, the better off we will be, and how hard to push or when to let off the gas a little bit when it comes to change.
All right. Another question came in about change here of obviously, how do you manage change during times of uncertainty for the future of your business and the market?
Well, I'm a personal believer that everything is always uncertain. The future is never finite or never specific. And so it's always going to be ambiguous at best. You can have the best laid plan and something will change today, tomorrow, the next day, and completely blow up your plan. And so I think that goes back to the point I made earlier, which is how do we not, it's not about helping people get comfortable with change, but how do we help them act in the face of discomfort?
Yeah,
Because
I agree with you, but yeah, how do we react? Go ahead.
I was just opening up the group. I know we can't come off mute, but any other thoughts? Anyone else have a varying opinion or additional thoughts you would add to how do you help people navigate change when there's a lot of uncertainty?
So adaptability has been put in chat. I'm sure some other people will have that. There we go.
Giving grace, yes. And I love giving grace because we give others grace, but we don't give ourselves grace. I think it's important for us as individuals to give ourselves grace as well, because we give others much more leniency than we give ourselves.
Correct. And another item about the change curve question came in. But that in the change curve, leaders always adapt first because they're the first ones to have to adapt to the change and actually drive the new action. So, what tips do you have for helping leaders remember and respond, knowing that others are slower to adapt?
Yeah, and again, I have a varying opinion on that too, because although leaders have the information first, doesn't mean they're changing first. They have the same emotions and same fears and potential insecurities that anyone else may have. The title doesn't mean that they're immune to those things. And so while they have the information first, it doesn't mean that they've changed any faster or slower than the people that they're responsible to manage as a leader within their team. And so your top change leaders may not even be people leaders at all. It's the people that figured out a way to be comfortable being uncomfortable and knowing and being humble enough to know that they don't have all the answers. And so I think the first piece would be dispel the myth that leaders change before everyone else, because they're changing right there with you. And they're going through the same hardships and challenges that anyone else may be facing, regardless of title. The expectation may be different, but the actual mindset and behaviors are the same.
Hmm. And are there any approaches, tools you use when a change fails to take hold to help get traction?
Um, Tools for when things fail. I think it goes back to being persistent and adaptable. Again, the best laid plans may not go well, and so being willing to say we tried this and it didn't work, but what do we learn from that experience? So going back to that first strategy, which is purposeful optimism, change it's never going to go the way you want it to. So how do you learn from the experience, learn from the journey, and knowing that the ambiguous part of change is that the destination may change at any different time. But as long as you're progressing forward and you're focusing on what can we do today to make ourselves a little bit better than we were the day before, and that may mean that you're not changing your plan, but you're changing perhaps the frequency, but you're still doing the same elements of say, show, involve. but the conversations, the questions you ask, the touch points, the frequency, those may ebb and flow, but ultimately the combination of those things that within your organization will be helpful. And I see somebody recommending the book Traction. I'm going to add that to my Amazon list of audiobooks to read. I read something similar, I think, along those lines, but certainly would appreciate the book recommendation, because Traction is a critical piece.
All right, I think that's it for our Q&A right now. So if you do have any questions, please put them into the Q&A and we'll get to them.
And then again, so wrapping up the Say, Show, Involve workshop, the Involve, again, are the activities where you create that space of co-creation. So being able to help people create, and again, dispelling the myth that leaders are changing before everyone else. Awareness does not drive change. Effort and action do. And so the leaders are changing right there with your team members, and keep them in mind as you think about Say, Show, and Involve, because they are moving. Some may be moving faster through change, but others are moving right there with the rest of their team, and they're learning to get comfortable with uncertainty as well. And so helping them and building that into your Say, Show, Involve plan to help them connect with what they need to accomplish is going to be critically important. So again, here's some additional examples. So leadership development business results. So that would be something perhaps that you say, and that could be a CEO video or data on the leadership impact. Something around the show would be we're all learning together, which again goes back to the point of leaders are learning and growing right there with their associates. And perhaps in the example here is executives share their development goals and progress. As that certainly drives trust and transparency when if the team members are asked to have a development plan, the leaders are also growing and learning too, and they have a development plan, and knowing that everyone else is on the same action steps, the same focus on effort, and that we're all aligned on our intent of what we're trying to accomplish. And we can celebrate those small wins whenever they come, whoever they come from, whether it's the leader or the associate, is going to be critically important. So you can go ahead and download that form. Feel free to use it however you want, but it gives you an opportunity to document. And again, I would encourage you to put no more than 3. We remember things in the power of 3s. So keep it simple. No more than 3 Say, Show, and Involve steps in each of those. Because again, you can always change and modify them, but it helps keep the messaging simpler when you're trying to communicate with your external audience. There's also another form that is called the Moments That Matter. And this is ultimately how you tell your story of change. And if you download the document, you'll see that there's before the rollout. So what are the things that we need to do or say to our audience before we roll out? So not only why is this what is the compelling reasons for change, and that goes beyond the compelling reason to change for an organization. Oftentimes change might be financial if it's a publicly traded company, but it's also what is the compelling reason for a change for every single person that is being impacted by that initiative? What's the value of them doing something different? That will be critically important. Creating that simple, memorable language. Avoid overly complex messaging. That will be well. And Karen, could you reshare those resources? I see a couple of comments asking for the materials to be able to download. Thank you, Karen. And so Karen's posting them in the chat so you can download those as a PDF. But again, keeping in mind, what are the things that we need to do and accomplish in that before the rollout? What is our compelling story that ties everything together? And for some, you may choose to share. This is our Say, Show, and Involve plan. This is how we're going to reach out to you, and this is how transparent, so that everyone knows that there is a plan and that this plan is subject to change, but we're all on board. And then during the implementation, where are people getting stuck, and how do we help them get back to that purposeful optimism and find a way to overcome the challenges that they may be facing? What are the behaviors that we need to model, and how do we need to model them, and who's the best person to model them? Again, leaders, it's important to have them model the behaviors, but also you want the people that are the early adopters, and they may be your people leaders. They may just be others that are up and coming stars within the organization that people look up to and they follow and they're inspired by them. Those could also be the people that you want to showcase and model the behaviors that you're looking for, because leaders can learn from those individuals as well. And then what are the early wins that we can highlight, and how are we going to capture them? Where do we want to post them that allows people to have the greatest access and ability to get to those things? And then the milestones, celebrating those small wins. It's easy to celebrate the big wins because they have the most perceived impact, but it's the small wins that keep people going, because there's a lot of distractions that we have in the world, and it's hard to lose sight of a future goal when we're waiting for that big win, when each and every day there's a small win we can celebrate, but we tend to devalue those in favor of the big wins, because it's the pain and the challenge of enduring change that we struggle with, not the belief in the goal, but the journey it takes to get there and the discipline that it takes to get there. So those small wins are even more important than the big wins, because that's what keeps us connected day in and day out and allows us to see what's possible, even when we're struggling to see how we're going to get to the end goal. So making sure that you're identifying what are those that we want to have in those in our plan, and having that checklist to keep us there and keep us connected, not just before, but during, and then also how do we continue to reinforce that change is possible and that we made it, and celebrating those wins along the way. So those two resources are available for you to download, and I encourage you to use them. And again, so keep that at your fingertips. So being a coach, I love a coach's challenge, and not so much a challenge, but an opportunity to encourage. So I encourage you to continue to transform how you personally look at change and how you keep connecting, and help others become their best selves. That was something that Ted focused on a lot as well. As his goal was not to win games or lose games. He wasn't focused on the wins and losses. When he came into the Richmond ASD organization, he was focused on how do I help each one of my players become the best version of themselves. And throughout the course of the multiple seasons, he did just that. He elevated every single member of the team, even the most staunch critics of who he was and whether or not he was credible, whether it was the people in the press, Trent Grimm, or anyone else. He was the one that won people over. One conversation, one demonstration of showing, and he involved them. He involved them in his press releases. He involved his coaches in the Diamond Dog conversations. He allowed team members to lead the halftime discussions instead of himself. He involved everyone each and every day in moving that team forward, because he was focused on helping them grow. And by doing that, he was able to lift the team and move them forward, which was a critical piece to winning. And that translates directly into the corporate world as well. So I encourage you to keep that and reframe one conversation at a time, and commit. If you're putting a plan together, commit to it yourself, but keep people accountable to committing to what they wanted to accomplish as well. And that'll move each and every one of you forward. So again, we gave you 2 resources to be able to document the things that you want to do, say, show, involve, and the moments that matter. That helps us emotionally connect to why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and what we celebrate each and every day. So over the course of the time, I just want to say thank you again for joining us on today's call, and to Karen and Jennifer for having me. We shared 3 key strategies: that purposeful optimism, that person-centered approach, celebrating those small wins. We gave you the framework of say, show, involve to help drive lasting change. And again, when we believe in possibility, anything is possible as long as we continue to believe. And just like Ted Lasso with his sign above the door, I believe and believe. And so again, thank you for your time. I'm going to give a quick shout out again. Thank you to ELB. If you're focused on driving change and you're focusing on developing leaders, they have some great programs out there. I am in no way affiliated with ELB or sponsored in any way, but again, just wanted to shout out and encourage you to stay curious and connect with them. So with that, Karen, I'm going to turn it back over to you to wrap up today's session.
All right. Thank you so much, Todd. And that was a great session. And thank you for Believing Better, the Ted Lasso inspired guide to communicating and driving change. Just a reminder, Ted Lasso is actually a owned by Apple TV and Warner Brothers Television, and we want to acknowledge that. So thank you so much, Todd. Thank you so much, ELB Learning, for sponsoring this great session. As you can see in the chat, it was great for our participants. So thank you so much. Thank you, participants, for absolutely engaging and asking those great questions. We really appreciate that. And with that, I am going to say thank you, everyone, and just tell you that we will see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.